Many years ago, I was still a seminarian, and I was in a fifth grade classroom. It was kind of open forum, Q&A, whatever they kind of wanted to talk about. And towards the end of this time, one boy raised his hand, and he said, "Isn't it unfair that when Jesus was on earth, he was healing all these people, and now he's not around to do that anymore? Isn't that unfair?" And he was getting fired up about this. He was like legit upset, It's sort of an interesting question our readings today remind me of. I think for one thing, it's important to ask ourselves, what was the point of Jesus' miracles? What was the point of Jesus' miracles? He obviously healed a lot of people, as we heard today, the deaf man, the blind, the lame, the lepers. He even rose people from the dead and brought them back to life. He goes into whole towns, and whoever he touches, he heals. But it's important to remember, too, that even at the time when Jesus walked the earth, there were still sick people. There were still blind people, deaf people. There were still lepers, and there were still people that died. So it's even not accurate, I guess, to say when Jesus was on the earth, everyone was healed and had life. So what were the point of Jesus' miracles? In the New Testament, the Greek word that we get miracles also means signs. So the miracles were signs. And signs don't exist just for themselves. They point to something else, right? They point to something greater. They point to something beyond it. So Jesus' miracles were signs that pointed to something even greater, something even beyond themselves, as great as they were. Catholic scholar Peter Kraft said, Jesus was not all about miracles, but the miracles were all about Jesus and a sign of who it was that had come. The one that, for example, Isaiah prophesied about in our first reading, was going to come and bring restoration and recreation to all of creation. And Jesus wasn't just some wonder worker. Jesus is the very meaning of life. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't come to earth just to bring miracles to a few. He came to earth to save the entire world. So Jesus' miracles were a sign of what he ultimately came to bring us. That fullness of life for which we were made, that reconciliation with God, that being restored finally to the covenant relationship with God that he made us for, not only here on earth, of course, but that we're going to share fully in that in heaven through what Jesus has done for us, through his life, death, resurrection, and ascension. I also think it's important, too, to remember that this healing, saving work of God, of course, still happens today. That Jesus is alive, that God is alive, and there are miracles that still happen today. The deaf hearing, the blind seeing, and miraculous healings, and all these kind of things. Yet while God sometimes does work dramatically, miraculously, and in so many everyday ways, he just chooses to work through human instruments, chooses to work through his people, bringing sight and hearing and transformation to the world through us. As we can think of, even today, all the many ways that the people of God go out and bring Jesus' healing to the world. From our Catholic hospitals, healthcare facilities, counselors, soup kitchens, educational institutions, the people of God going out and being people who work for justice, bringing the healing of mercy and forgiveness, doing the corporal and the spiritual works of mercy. These are all ways that we enable God to to open eyes and ears and mouths and hearts, to bring the transformation that Jesus came to bring us. Of course, that transformation comes into our own lives as well. And in a particular way, I think through the sacraments. You know, these sacraments are the physical ways that God touches our life. I do love in that gospel how Jesus, he just sort of got in there with this guy. First of all, he took him away from the crowd, like kind of a private moment, but maybe the crowd was what was preventing him from really hearing. And so he takes him away where he can have this encounter. And he touches the man where he needed to be touched. And he literally put some of himself into the guy. And Jesus does that too through the sacraments, through the waters of baptism that bring us a new life and a new identity. The sacrament of reconciliation that makes us new again, anointing of the sick, confirmation. And of course, in the sacrament of the Eucharist, Jesus literally puts himself into us. And by his grace, we can continue to be transformed, to have more and more our ears open to hear his word, our eyes open to see what he's doing, our mouths open to proclaim his praise and to share his life and his word with others, our hearts reopened to know his love for us and to have his heart for one another. And so as we encounter Christ here in the Mass today, let us rejoice that he is alive and still working in and through you and me, bringing his healing, his life, his salvation to the world, one person at a time.